Bible, especially the book of Exodus, that probably seemed kind of boring to you before. It was those sections of the Bible that when you were in your daily reading pattern, especially if it was at night, you would get to that part and you'd start going, yeah, yes, Lord, and you'd go on reading and then you'd fall back asleep. Well, today the Bible will come alive through pictures and through word. And we're going to start out a little bit slow so we make sure that we understand where we're going. But we're basically going to look at the tabernacle, heaven touching earth. And our first slide there shows the tabernacle at night. A lady gave me permission to use this one. And you can see that the tabernacle basically was a tent in the wilderness. And it had a linen fence around it. That fence was about 7.5 foot tall. And it went all the way around the tabernacle. Around the tabernacle, you'll see that there are a lot of other little tents, and those are the tribes. And the tribes were around the tabernacle in a specific order. And so let me, there we go. There we go. There we are. Okay. So let me just read a little bit to you just to set this foundation down for us. 3,400 years ago, the people of God were slaves for nearly 400 years in the hands of the pharaohs of Egypt. While enduring the cruel oppression of slavery, they had hard taskmasters. Many people cried out for God for deliverance, but deliverance did not come. It was as if God did not even hear the cries and the pleas and the prayers of his people. So freedom from bondage was very slow in coming. Generation after generation after generation passed with no relief, no freedom. Just day in and day out, drudgery, slavery, hard work. So the people, being human, grew weary and began to lose their own culture, their own language, even their faith in God. They had been influenced by the religious systems around them in Egypt. The gods that the people in Egypt worshiped, now they were becoming familiar with them. And they may not have always bowed down to these other gods, but daily before them was not anything of their God, but of the pagans, the Egyptians. Soon they exchanged their own worship or understanding of God for that of the Egyptians. Many believe they were even losing their mother tongue, the Hebrew language, and were being influenced by all the cultures around the world except their own. So God raised up a Moses to demand Pharaoh to let the people go. And I know as soon as I said that, you just had a picture of Charlton Heston in your mind with his staff and the robe and the beard and all of that. And some of that movie is accurate, and some of it's not. The robe that Charlton Heston wore was correct. It was the color of the tribe of Levi with the red, the black, and the white. But Pharaoh's heart was hard, and he wouldn't listen to the pleas of Moses or Aaron. He just wasn't going to listen. This was his land. He was in charge. He was the ruler, and you're a slave. I don't listen to slaves. So God had to use a series of 10 plagues to convince Pharaoh to free the Hebrew slaves. The plagues are listed in Exodus chapter 7 and part of chapter 12. Let me just recall them for you. First, the water of the Nile River changed to blood. The entire region was teeming with frogs. People and animals were infested with gnats. I had that experience just last Thursday. I volunteer at the state prison that's up the road, and if you're not from here, last week, early on, we had a pretty terrible storm, and the prison sits right at the bottom of Lake Michigan. And when I went in about 5 o'clock that night, as I was walking through the corridor to go into the prison, there was just gnats all over my shirt. And, I just had to brush them off. And it made me think of this passage, how pesky gnats are, but especially when you're covered with them. So the people and the animals were infested with gnats. Next, swarms of flies on and in the homes of the Egyptians only. Then there was a plague to cause the Egyptian livestock to die. The Egyptian livestock. For the most part, the slaves didn't have any livestock, but the Bible makes a point to say that some of this only inflicted the Egyptians themselves. Next, this is my favorite one, a breakout of festering boils on the Egyptian men and animals. Now, I don't know, the scripture doesn't say that it broke out on the females, but, the men and the animals was enough, festering. Then he sent the worst hailstorm that Egypt had ever experienced. Then a swarm of locusts to devour the land. Total darkness for 3 days then. I would have given up pretty much after the frogs or the gnats, maybe even the blood. But then total darkness for 3 days. Still, each time Moses went to Pharaoh, his heart was hard. He would not relinquish control. He would not free the Hebrew slaves. Finally, the last plague. This one could affect the Hebrew people, but they had to do something to keep it from happening. Every firstborn son in Egypt was to die. The first night of Passover was celebrated while they were in bondage, while they were in Egypt. The firstborn of all households without the blood of the lamb on the doorpost would be struck by the death angel. Didn't matter if they were Hebrew, didn't matter if they were Egyptian, they would die. So the people of God obeyed, and they took the blood of the lamb and smeared it, wiped it, sprinkled it over the doorposts, so the death angel would know to pass over this house and not visit death on the firstborn. This next one here just kind of shows you a little bit of the path that they were going to follow. We have, let's see, a little bit hard to see. They're starting up there in Egypt, and they're going to go down to the dip of the, down by Mount Sinai there is where we're going to end up, at least today. So they had traveled quite a long ways. With the 10 plagues behind them, they had crossed the Red Sea and journeyed to the foot of Mount Sinai. Now here, I love this part of the story because the people become impatient. They start groaning. The leeks and the onions in Egypt now seem to be something that they would want to return to. And besides, who put this Moses guy in charge? Like, who made him God? He's led us out here to the middle of nowhere to die. They had forgot about the 10 plagues, many of which never touched any of them. They forgot about the death angel. They forgot about the parting of the Red Sea. They forgot about all those things. And now, while Moses is on Mount Sinai to hear from God, they're kind of below and they're growing impatient. Not too much different than humans today. We don't like sitting. Patience is not our strong suit. And give us enough time, we will mess things up if we're in charge ourselves. So they're down there, and Aaron, Moses' brother, who later becomes the first high priest, the people go to him, and they start complaining. And they say, why don't you help us here? Surely you can do something. Right here. There we go. So in Exodus, we find out what happens. And it's an interesting story. And I want to read it just from the Bible because I don't think I should add to it, because I want you to hear the word of the Lord and the word of Aaron. Moses said to Aaron, "What did these people do to you that you led them into such great sin?" "Don't be angry, my Lord," Aaron answered. "You know how prone these people are to evil. They said to me, 'Make us gods who will go before us.' And as for this fellow Moses, Who brought us up out of Egypt? We don't know what has happened to him. So I told them, whoever has any gold, take it off. Then they gave me the gold, and I threw it in the fire, and out popped this calf. I had nothing to do with it, Moses. I mean, these people were dancing and drinking and doing all kinds of things, and so I just strip them of their gold, and I threw it in the fire, and out came this calf. Pretty much like the Garden of Eden, the snake and Eve and Adam. First sin, then shame, and then shift the blame. It's pretty much like me and you, especially when we're younger. Have you ever watched children? Even in a day school, a preschool, even though they're little, maybe they may not even be able to talk yet, and they're getting ready to poke somebody or twist an ear or take a toy that don't belong to them. What's the first thing they do? See if anybody's watching. Even if no one told them, this is the rule, don't break it, something inside them tells them this isn't something they should do. So here you have the Hebrews. They've been freed from bondage, generations worth of bondage, but they got all this old baggage. They have all these old ways of thinking. They have all these old sinful patterns in their life. They have this other culture. They have this other language that's influenced them. Pretty much they've been separated from their own God. So before they could experience actually the true God, he had to take them on a little trip into the wilderness. Now, while the people camped at Mount Sinai, when Moses climbed up there, he got two things. First, he got the 10 Commandments, or the tablets of the law, but he also got a pattern, a blueprint for a sanctuary, a tent in the desert. So Moses was instructed to make the tabernacle and all its furnishings according to the pattern that God would give him. Not a pattern that Moses would think of, not a pattern that a committee got together and said, this is what we'll have and this is what color it'll be, but the pattern that God gave him. A place where heaven would touch earth, a place of worship that would not be designed by man and his attempt to approach God, but it'd be where God would be touching man on earth, a place that he could meet with them at. Now, all preachers like this, and if you're a minister, here's your passage. How the vision and plan of God was funded. Exodus 25. You are to receive the offering for me from each whose heart prompts him to give. These are the offerings you are to receive from them: gold, silver, and bronze, which we believe really was copper, blue, purple, and scarlet yarn, and fine linen, goat hair, ram skins dyed red, and hides of sea cows, acacia wood, olive oil for light, spices for anointing oil, and for the fragrant incense, and the onyx stones, and the other gems to be mounted on the ephod and the breastpiece. Last night, if you were here, you saw me dressed in the high priest's garments. Tomorrow, we will be specifically looking at the high priest's garments, the 8 golden garments, and their significance in our life today. So he tells them to make him a sanctuary. Now, look at all the stuff that's required up there. Does that stuff grow in the desert? Where did these supplies come from? Speak up, you know where they're from. Where'd they come from? From Egypt. Pharaoh was so glad to get rid of them, take some stuff and go and never come back. Of course, he changed his mind a little bit later and chased after them, and then everybody had to drown. But this was the spoils from their oppressors. All the gold, all the silver, all the copper, all the jewels, all the fine linen, all the yarn, all the hides, all of this came from their enemy, their oppressor. Sometimes we have to listen to God, and he will supply our needs from the most unlikely sources. Some of my greatest lessons have been learned when I was in places that were miserable, the dry places of my own spiritual walk. And he supplied my need. Most of you can see the furniture up here. The furniture I've been gathering for several years, as with the costume and all of that. I've had to take classes and get training to learn how to make things, but it costs money. And I don't say this in a bragging way, but to show you if God has laid something on your heart, He will fund it. He will take care of it. None of this stuff was paid for by any offerings. None of it. Unless you consider my wife allowing me to spend our money the way I see fit as an offering. But He gave me ideas. He blessed my business. He showed me how not to get in trouble in business, and I don't have a business degree, and the extra He supplied to fund my passion. I am not the brightest bulb on the Christmas tree, but He has put me before a lot of people that are very knowledgeable to help me to fulfill this passion. When I first started with it, which was in 99 as far as building some of the tabernacle stuff, I have to tell you, I was a little bit scared to tell anybody. And I wrote it on a card, one of them prayer cards, and I put it in the offering plate because that church people would pray over those prayer requests. But I didn't put my name because I was afraid someone would ask me how the progress on the tabernacle was coming. But I just said, God, I would like to build the tabernacle for you, and I would like to teach. If this is all I do the rest of my life, I would be happy. Please help me to do it. I didn't believe it, but I put it in there, and slowly but surely things started happening. And as new things would come up, I'd either get the training, or someone would supply the knowledge, or someone would help me to build the various things that you see. So sometimes He will even use your enemies. He will even use sources that you do not even know about to fund your passion if it is for Him. Maybe He might fund some of your passions if it's for you, but I know He will fund your passion for Him. So He tells them to make this sanctuary, and He tells them that they got to build it in a certain way. They are to make this and all the furnishings exactly like the pattern I will show you. So what I want to do from here on out is to look at the tabernacle and just look at some of the pattern. Look at the structure, lay the foundation, and at the end we'll touch base on each piece of furniture and kind of look at how it applies to our life. It's my understanding, my belief, that if you don't understand the tabernacle, you might as well just take the book of Hebrews, pretty much most of it, and just take it out of the Bible, because it'll make no sense to you. It is my particular belief that if you don't understand the tabernacle, there's a whole lot in the Gospel of John and the feasts that are mentioned, that if you don't understand those feasts and their connection to the tabernacle, there are things that will mystify you in the book of John that will not make sense. And then when you do understand them, you'll look at Hebrews and the book of John in a whole different light. So He wants them to understand this pattern. Understanding the pattern of the tabernacle will also help us to avoid these dry or dark spiritual places we can get ourselves into. Now, just as a reminder, remember the tabernacle basically was a tent, a movable place of worship, a movable cathedral maybe. And it had specific colors, specific materials, and specific size for most of the things. The next slide shows you just the basic overview. And if you look at the little white fence that goes all around, you can see the poles there. It is 100 cubits in length by 50 cubits wide. Now a cubit, we are told, is possibly 18 inches. They measured it from the elbow to the tip of the fingers, and it was supposed to be 18 inches. There are some that use what's called the royal cubit, and it measures 22 inches. But for the most part, People believe a cubit was 18 inches. So basically you have an area there, 100 cubits by 50 cubits. And that comes out to like 150 feet by 75 feet, I believe. Inside this area here, you're going to see various pieces of furniture. I believe you can see them pretty good. Let me see if my pointer will help us out. It's not going to work, is it? No. It's too white up there. The first part there, you'll see it's red and it's got like a hole in it. That's the gate. And we sing this song, I will enter his gates with thanksgiving in my heart. I will enter his courts with praise, from one of the Psalms. That's the gate that they're talking about. That is the only entrance into the tabernacle proper. You don't go under the fence. You don't crawl under it. You don't cut your own little hole in the back and sneak in. There's only one place that you can go through. Only one way. Only one gate. Now, if you'll go up right above that, you're going to see like a big box with some poles in it. That's your brazen altar. Now, tomorrow we'll have the brazen altar here. I don't have it up today because it's huge. It is 7.5 feet by 7.5 feet by 7.5 feet by 7.5 feet and 4.5 feet tall. And then that would have been built up on a mound because they would burn the fire underneath. The original fire, Scripture says, was started by God. After that original fire was started, then it was the people's responsibility to keep the fire burning continually. It was to never go out, never go out. But it was God's fire that ignited it, not man's fire. All right? But they had a responsibility. Once you get past the brazen altar, the next piece that you have is the laver. Now, the laver, we are told that it was made of hammered copper, and we'll look at that in a little bit. And we know it was two pieces, the bowl part and a base part. But we're not told the dimensions of it. For whatever reason, I don't know, but we're not told how high or wide it was. But we're told what its function was, and we'll look at that in a little bit. Then if you move on, you'll see that there is the front part of this tent, but the top of it's been taken off. And you'll see that there's 5 golden pillars there. And then there's another entranceway, another curtain. Just beyond those poles is the holy place. If you go on through there, you can just barely see it a little bit. There are 4 other golden poles, and there is another veil, and that is the great veil, at least in the temple, that was rent in two. Just behind that veil is the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant was. So just to give you a little bit of a better picture of it, you have your entrance part there, and there you can see the priest at the brazen altar. The brazen altar was the place of sacrifice. This is where the animals would be brought to be inspected before basically they were offered up unto the Lord. Now let's take a look at the gate. This gate here is down in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. I have a friend down there named Dick Luddig that does the teaching. And this is the front entrance gate. This is their version of it. You see the branches there? There's like 12 of them, one representing each tribe. You can also see that on the outside there, there's like triangles of red. Those are to symbolize drops of blood. And you can see that it's red at the top too. And so you got these, the blood or the sacrifices coming from the tribes, the people. And it comes down to that middle piece, and you see the streams of blood or the streams of red. In the center there, you have a blue diamond there, a light blue or a sky blue diamond. Now this part isn't in Scripture. This is something that has been shared with me over the years. But some believe that that was the window of heaven. Okay, that represented the window of heaven. Blue representing God in the sky. And what is it that Malachi says? What does he say? To test God, to try him, to bring your offerings and see if he will not open the windows of heaven. You got to look at what the sanctuary, the tabernacle, represented. This was divine space. This was holy space. This was where God chose to dwell or meet men. God didn't live here, just like he doesn't live in this building or in any other building on the face of the earth. It was a place that he designated, that if you do this, I'll meet you there. If you build this place and sanctify it, if you do it according to the pattern, this is where I will meet you. Could he meet them anywhere? Yes, he could. But because of everything they had experienced in Egypt and all those old patterns, he had to take them far away from Egypt, out where there were no influences, in the heat of the day and the cool of the night, to get their attention, to change all those old patterns in their life. And so this was the place of sacrifice. This was the place of bringing the offerings. This was the place of blessing. So when they did things according to his pattern, he said he would open the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing they could not contain. Just inside that gate, remember there was the brazen altar. You can see on my left in the back is the brazen altar. In the far back upper part of the screen is the tabernacle. That's a life-size version of the tabernacle, built according to the dimensions that are found in the book of Exodus. But you see these two wooden devices up front there? Those are what they would hold the sacrifice with. You can see the bigger one, that's for the red heifer, the bullock, and the smaller one would have been used for like our ram or our lamb or the ewe. Do you know the difference between these animals? This here is a goat. This one here is the one that's offered up unto the Lord. Well, let me just show you him real quick, because we may or may not have time for that tomorrow. This one here is a goat. He's got his horns and everything. He's not mean, okay? But this goat here, as you'll see tomorrow on the Day of Atonement, there were two goats that were offered up. One was to the Lord, and to distinguish which one was to the Lord, they tied the red wool around his neck. Aaron, would you come here and help me? I need you to just kind of hold him and just step back here for a second and let me untie this. Now, there was another goat that we hear more about in sermons and teachings, and his name was the scapegoat. Of course, that's in the King James. Actually, that's not the word in Hebrew. This was the goat for Azazel. This is the one that they either led out into the wilderness to die, or during temple times, they kind of pushed him off a cliff to get it done and over with quickly. But remember, that first goat that was going to be offered up to the Lord, they tied the red wool around his neck. But the one that was going to go for Azazel and be cast out of the camp, they tied the red around his horns. Now, I'm going to tell you about a passage that you probably haven't thought about for a while. They believed that on the Day of Atonement, when this goat was cast out into the wilderness, no one could feed it, no one could take care of it, that by the time that he died, this wool from the sun would be bleached out and it'd be white. And they believed that that was symbolic of their sins of the camp being forgiven. And Isaiah says, though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be white as snow. Okay? That's where that comes from. I call him Skippy. Skippy the scapegoat. Okay? You can put him back over there. Now, he's a goat. Aaron, you want to grab that next one behind you? Skippy likes tension. You got to face him forward. Okay, Aaron, if you'll turn him around so they can see. Now, this here is a sheep, but it's a male sheep. It's called a ram. He's got his little ram horns, okay? This here is what the traditional shofar is made from, the ram's horn, okay? So he is a sheep, but he's a male one. He's a ram. I'm going to put him back. This is the mama. She's bigger, at least in my set. And she's a sheep, but she's a ewe, an EWE. So she's still a sheep, but the female is called a ewe. A lamb is not what it is. A lamb basically designates how old it is. A lamb is a sheep, and it could be male or female, but it's a sheep that is 1 year or younger. It's a lamb, okay? We'll look at those a little bit more tomorrow, but these are just some of the offerings that were brought to that gate to be inspected. Just some of those that were brought and put in those devices that you see, that you used to see. Should I push this? There we go. So that's what those are for, because, you know, a sacrifice usually doesn't go willing. All right? So first they tie him up on the horns of the altar, which we'll look at, but then they got to have something to hold that animal. He's not just going to go ahead and take my life. You can see another version of it. There you have another picture of the brazen altar with the ramp going up the side. Now remember, that's 4.5, just the metal part is 4.5 foot tall. And then you have the ramp. And you can see the space under there. Here's one that is in Israel that another exhibit is put together. And you can see I'm sure it was all healthy. Tomorrow, what you're going to see is our brazen altar. My son Aaron, who's 12 years old, helped me to wrap the wood with copper and hammer it and put the horns on. And so that'll be here in the front for us so we can look at that. As I said, the next piece of furniture, which we do have this one with us, was the brazen laver. Laver, kind of where we get our word lavatory from. This is not a wishing well, okay? It's not a wishing well. It was two pieces, the stand and the bowl. You'll notice around here that it's designed in a certain way. Well, this was a special offering from a group of women who used to wait outside the fence when the tabernacle was being built, and they wanted to give. They wanted to do something and be a part. So they offered up their highly polished copper mirrors that they brought from where? Egypt. They offered those up just to make the water basin. The laver is where the priest would wash his hands and his feet. You've seen some of them that have a receptacle at the bottom, and they make you want to think that he would stick his feet in there and wash them. Probably not. Probably not. That's more a modern way of looking at things. But if the camera can come up here, and if you look in here, this is highly polished. And you can see where copper has been hammered together to create this bowl. This water was changed continually. And when the priest would wash his hands and his feet, he didn't like wash them and dip them this way, because then the water wouldn't be clean. They would dip from this and he would wash and clean. And this was kept full. Some say that there was 10 gallons of water. Some say up to 30 gallons. By the time of Solomon's temple, of course, it had been a very big building project, and the laver was held up by bronze oxen, not real ones, but bronze oxen, and were on wheels. And by the time of Herod's temple, second temple, the building program got much, much bigger and more money, and they had many of these lavers. But its practical use was just for washing. Now remember, the high priest had already dipped in a mikvah, had already cleansed himself. This was to basically help him to remove any of the debris and the dust or any of the blood from basically cooking the sacrifices at the brazen altar, and to wash his feet. And you and I need this in our life. We need the washing, the daily washing, the renewing of the mind, just in our normal duties and way of life. No matter how clean we think we are, there are things that are kind of attaching themselves to us along the way, and we have to take time for reflection and kind of wash and cleanse ourselves. So the brazen laver, remember, it was made from what? Copper, and the highly polished mirrors that they had brought from Egypt. There is a picture of an actual bronze or copper mirror from that period of time. There you can see the inside of the copper laver. And there you see Terry again posing for a mugshot. Now remember, the tabernacle was basically a tent. We don't have time to look at the coverings that were on the tabernacle. We want to go and look inside, so we've taken the top off the tabernacle, and you can see that basically there are gold pillars and planks all around this holy space here. All right. Inside that second curtain, or the first curtain when you're going to the tent itself, inside there, that is the holy place. And the holy place had three objects in it, three furnishings. It had the menorah, mistakenly called the candlestick. Candles were not invented, I believe, until like 500 years after Jesus walked the earth. This lamp burned olive oil. Remember one of the things they were to bring from Egypt? Olive oil, amongst all the other precious metals and yarns and animals. Also inside the holy place was the golden altar of incense and the table of showbread. Now we have these here. This is the menorah. Now the menorah that I have here is designed after what you've seen on the Arch of Titus in Rome. And that was an arch that commemorated the Romans sacking the temple in 70 AD. And this is what their depiction of the menorah looked like. We're not told how tall the menorah is. We are told how many branches there were. We are told what it burned, olive oil. We are told about various aspects of the menorah, but not how tall it was. It was made out of one piece of hammered gold. Of course, mine is gold leaf, and we've electrified it. I have one that does burn olive oil, but it is pretty messy and slippery when you're trying to put it back in the trailer. So we leave that one in the garage. You'll see in a few moments, we'll look at the golden altar of incense up here, but let me see if we can find us a picture of it real quick here. Let me go back to the menorah. You see the menorah drawing with the straight branches. Many of the Orthodox Jews say that the menorah, like I have up here, is improper because the Hebrew word for that arm or that branch is the same word for a reed, and it would have been straight. So you have both of them there. There's the table of showbread. Now remember, the table of showbread had 12 pieces of bread, 12 loaves of bread, one representing each tribe, and they were continually replaced as needed. There was also, besides the bread, wine there, and up here was some containers that had frankincense. And frankincense would have been taken by the priests, and at particular times, he would have put the frankincense on the coal and would have allowed that hot coal to burn the incense. Now, where did that coal come from? Did he have the charcoal briquettes that you buy at the gas station and they just kind of every once in a while went through the gas station? No, that coal was taken from the altar, the brazen altar. Remember, there's only one fire, and God initiated the fire, but it was the people's responsibility to keep that fire burning. They would take coals from the brazen altar, and he would bring them in what was called a fire pan, and he would put them in the incense burner on the golden altar of incense, and this is where he would keep that going. Every morning and every evening, he would put coals on that incense burner. Every morning and every evening, he would also trim the wicks and replenish the olive oil in the menorah. Okay? Somewhere over here, I must have lost my little clicker. See, I'm not used to using one of those, so I don't know what I did with it. Oh well, you'll have to do it manually for me. Jim, did you take my my clicker? Did you do that just to mess me up? Oh, when I was caught. See, now that person's observant. She was wrong, but she was observant. See, I should have brought my mom with me because she would have said, knucklehead, it's back over there at the table of showbread, just like everything else. Just look where the food's at, and that's where Terry left his stuff at. All right. So we have the table of showbread there, and you can see the pitcher for the wine, the cup, and what does that remind you of? We'll look at it in a second. Another shot of the table of showbread. There you have a shot of the golden altar of incense. It's made of acacia wood and wrapped in gold. Of course, you can see the veil. Now, our veil, the traditional one is 15 foot tall and 15 foot wide. And it had cherub on it. And remember, right here would have been that one veil just going into the tent. This area here would have been the holy place. And through this veil here is the Holy of Holies, and behind there is the Ark of the Covenant. The high priest went into the Ark, or went into the Holy of Holies only one time a year. And as we'll see tomorrow, he did not wear the breastplate, and he did not wear the gold plate and all the fancy clothes. He only wore white on that day. And he only went in once a year. We have a shot of him in there. And tomorrow, you'll see inside there, and we have something special lined up for you. I don't want to give you too much of that one. Now, I just want to go back real quick and look at the pieces of furniture. You have your brazen altar, your place of sacrifice. It's made of copper. Copper is symbolic of judgment. Symbolic of judgment. It's a place where the 5 Levitical sacrifices were brought. There was a peace offering, a sin offering, a trespass offering, a fellowship offering. We'll look at those more on Saturday. But it was a place of sacrifice. And there was only one place of sacrifice. As you went through, only one gate, one entrance. And the brazen altar, remember, is 7.5 foot square and 4.5 foot tall. All the other furniture could fit in the brazen altar. It wasn't carried that way, but it all could fit in there. Then you have your brazen laver, the place of washing, the place of cleansing, and we need that in our life. Then you have the menorah, you have the table of showbread, and you have the golden altar of incense. For the Christian, the place of sacrifice was not made of copper or bronze, but it was on a limestone hill called Golgotha. Some say that the laver represents the washing of the water, washing of the word on a daily basis. I don't particularly go one way or another with it, but I do know that we need a place of cleansing in our life. The menorah. The menorah burned the olive oil, but it was the only source of light in the holy place. The only source of light. What did Jesus say? I am the light of the world. The table of showbread. The table of showbread was the only place of nourishment when the priest would be performing his ritual duties throughout the days and weeks and months, but especially on the day of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. Only one place of nourishment. And Jesus said he was the bread of life, the manna that came down from heaven. Now, the golden altar of incense, this represents our prayers, it represents our worship. The incense going up is a sweet smell in the nostrils of God. It represents our praises. If we have time on Saturday, I will talk to you about why this has handles on it. No, I'm going to do it right now. I'm not going to wait till Saturday. All right. This is a funny incense burner. Most of you have probably seen ones that Roman Catholic priests and Anglicans have, and it's on the chain and they swing it. Well, that's a Roman version of an incense burner or an incense chalice. This is the Hebrew version of it. And the reason why that it has these handles is, you know the passage that talks about the sacrifice of praise and the lifting of holy hands? I'm not saying that our modern day version of lifting up hands is inappropriate, but it's making reference to when the priest, the high priest, in the morning and in the evening would offer up this sacrifice of praise, because this represented the praise and the prayers of the people. This incense, if you look at Exodus chapter 30, there are 4 ingredients in it, but every incense also had salt in it. We'll look at that later. But this represented the worship and the prayers of the people, the praise of the people. And so he, on the Day of Atonement, was going to have to go behind the veil here. Now we know that when Jesus died, the veil was rent, right? Well, before then, it was always covered. Now, if I have this in my hands, how do I get behind that veil? How do I get behind that veil? Kick it with my foot? Ain't gonna work. Kind of nudge in backwards? Won't work. I want you to read the book of Hebrews tonight, chapters 9 and 10 and 11. And I want you to look at what happened to the furniture in the tabernacle in the book of Hebrews. There's something missing. And then think about this. I got to give you some homework. I'm a teacher, you know. By the way, that Exodus 30 formula for the incense, $600 a pound. $600 a pound today. I had someone make it up for me. They had to get different ingredients from the Mideast, but it's a particular smell. And so the golden altar of incense, in John chapter 17, Jesus, we say that that's his high priestly prayer. And one of the things that he prayed for the disciples, and not only them, but you also, was that I pray that you not take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. Sometimes in the church we got it wrong. We think we have to isolate ourselves from the world. And there are periods that we need to pull away. It's not isolation. He says, I pray that you not take them out of the world, but protect them from the evil one. He will insulate us. We don't have to isolate ourselves. Now, does that mean we're just supposed to do just about anything that the world does? No, and you know I'm not saying that. But we don't have to be afraid, because how is anybody going to understand God if you and I don't rub shoulders with them once in a while? One of the problems with religious groups today, we get so used to being amongst ourselves and kind of like it, that we turn into a club, maybe even a clique, and no one else can get in. We need to remember, he will insulate us, he will protect us. Behind there is the Holy of Holies, and we will look at that more tomorrow. I'd like to leave you with one verse, and it's from chapter 36 of Exodus. They received from Moses all the offerings of the Israelites had brought to carry out the work of constructing the sanctuary. And the people continued to bring free will offerings morning after morning. So all the skilled craftsmen who were doing all the work on the sanctuary left their work and said to Moses, the people are bringing more than enough for doing the work the Lord commanded to be done. Then Moses gave an order, and they sent this word throughout the camp. No man or woman is to make anything else as an offering for the sanctuary. And so the people were restrained from bringing more because what they had already brought was more than enough to do the work. That is the first and the only time that you'll ever have a minister of the Lord saying, we don't need any more money, please don't bring any more, we can't use it.